Imagine painting a pet portrait without any eyes, nose, or mouth. It would look lifeless, right? It would look so bizarre. It's the unique shape and details in the eyes, nose, and mouth, including the texture and the color, that is key in creating a realistic portrait that allows the viewer to connect on a very emotional level with that animal. Hi creatives, welcome. My name is Lauren Elizabeth with Lauren Elizabeth Animal Art, and I help creatives master technique in acrylics and find their style, their unique style in animal art. Now, I painted Jack the Chihuahua mix not one time, not two times, but 3 times. A comparison tutorial showing how a beginner can progress to an advanced, realistic, vibrant pet portrait. So it's the eyes, nose, and mouth that are those natural focal points, those primary features that our human eyes look for. So without it, a portrait would just be so odd, right? So in this video, using my final portrait of Jack the Chihuahua mix, I'm going to show you how I paint the eyes, nose, and mouth. That means for dogs where you can't see the iris and the eye and it's all black, that's the colored part of the eye, and where the teeth are exposed, and that colorful muzzle. So before we get started though, comment down below your favorite winter animal, and I'll choose one to become the next step-by-step real-time tutorial. All right, creatives, so without further ado, let's get started. All right, so if you'd like to learn how to paint Jack the Chihuahua mix in real time, and also see the changes you can make to your portraits in this comparison tutorial, you can find that in my Pet Portrait Masterclass link below. Now, right now I'm mixing up the core colors, I call it, for the nose. I've also zoomed into that sweet little nose so you can get a good view as I'm painting. And on my paint palette, if you notice, I have my dark value, my medium value, and my light value, my core colors. I may mix up some more along the way when I mix up my core colors for a specific body part, but those are the main ones I pull from. I find this helps me not only be efficient, but separate value. Now this is a very dark nose, so my medium value is gonna be pretty dark. But before I apply that medium value, I'm gonna start with my darkest value to fill in the nostrils, outline the nose, and then I'm gonna go in with the dark and medium values first. Now, before I even start painting, I must identify that light source, which is coming from the upper right. That means that the bottom of the nose and the left and right sides of the nostrils are going to be the darkest areas. Now, there's a little indent on the bottom of the nose below both nostrils. I'm leaving white there for the light values that I'll be blending in a little bit. Now, if you notice here, it's the blending technique that's helping me change from the dark to the medium to the light, blending that at the top with small, tiny little circles, not adding that bumpy texture just yet. To achieve that texture at the top of the nose, that's where I apply the layering technique. I still have a layer that's damp here. I'm still doing more blending. I'm still looking for those subtle changes in value where it gets just slightly lighter. So once I've applied that blended base, I go in using the layering technique to apply tiny light gray dots with very small gaps in between and very tiny dots to create that texture over top the areas that we were just blending. Now, you know what's really fun? When you switch out that black, replace it with a violet, repeat those exact same steps in that order, and you have a more interesting but still realistic nose. Now on to those very obvious long teeth. A very distinct feature on Jack. So what I do with teeth is I first mix up a medium or light gray. I chose a darker gray because of the muzzle being darker and the lack of light in this area. Next, what I do is I mix up a light yellow. I like to use a more natural looking yellow like yellow ochre instead of a very vibrant yellow like cadmium yellow, also adding a bit of light gray. This is for older dogs and or areas where the teeth are not getting much light. Puppies will have whiter, less yellow teeth. Now, teeth are very smooth, so I'm going to apply the blending technique. I'll paint all the teeth in with this color and then adjust it by adding in more white, blending in more white, where it's getting highlighted. And if necessary, I'll add in more of the gray to darken up the areas getting very little light inside the teeth. Now, something that I see a lot of artists forget are the gums with this open mouth, the teeth exposed. But this little bit of red that I place around those teeth helps to make it more realistic. So I mixed permanent red with a bit of the medium gray, just adding a little bit of this wrapped around some of the teeth. Hi creatives, sorry to interrupt, but if you're currently going through an awful lot of stress, anxiety, depression, maybe even addiction, being creative and using animal art can be a powerful tool in those times. It was about 8 years ago where I found myself in addiction, and it was animal art therapy combined with group therapy and my faith that got me through and led to the creation of the Pet Portrait Masterclass. Now, this was previously called the Online Animal Art Masterclass, but the heart is still the same, helping creatives reduce stress and master technique. But now I'm focusing on creating realistic, colorful pet portraits, even helping the beginner artist progress from the photo to that quality portrait. Again, that's called the Pet Portrait Masterclass. I have that link down below, but guys, let's get back to it. Next, we have the muzzle. Now, not all dog muzzles are dark like Jack's. Sometimes they have markings on them, but sometimes they can be much lighter. But when they're dark like this, I like to really make it interesting with color. So for this one, I'm using violet with the grays left over from the nose. Isn't it amazing we can still sometimes use those colors that we mixed up even at the very beginning? But I won't stop here with this violet because I can actually put it below that bottom lip and just the smallest bit to the left and right of those big canine teeth. Now, instead of using a violet mixed with gray, I could use a blue, also mixed with gray, or a blue violet. Now, I don't want to make that area too dark where we can't make out the nose, but we also want it just light enough so we can join it with the fur around the muzzle. And I'll show that to you in just a little bit after we paint the eyes. So I painted in the lip with a darker version of violet and gray, and I continued with that gray, that same exact gray, to create more of the shading above those teeth and some of the exposed skin. Now, I didn't blend that in, I just used lines that layered over top, short little lines that helped me create that shading and a little bit of that fuzzy texture on the muzzle. Next, we have the eyes, and you can see in the reference, you cannot see the colored part or the iris of the dog eyes. So if you can't see it, don't make it up. There's just very few instances where we can make that iris up and paint it in. So to achieve this look, it's actually more simple than you think. First, I outline the eyeball itself, getting those shadows above the top of the eye. Those are often the bigger ones with a dark gray. Then I fill in the entire eyeball with a medium gray that's still dark but lighter in value than the shadows I added around the eyeball. And then back in with that dark gray to working from the center out, leaving the smallest bit of that medium gray on the outside of that eyeball. But it's nicely blended with that darker gray. Then I go back to my medium and light grays to put back any highlights that are really strong. I pull those out, and then I add that really strong little dot of a highlight, which very often, but not always, sits right below where that shadow ends at the top of the eye. That eyelid is creating a bit of a shadow, and below that line is where that dot's gonna be. Eyelids can be another great way we can pull in more color. In fact, I'm pulling in more violet just like I did around the muzzle with gray around the eye. A dark value that is just slightly lighter than what I used for the eye. Now, if you notice here, I'll leave the smallest bit of white where I plan to leave a very light value or a very dark value. In this case, it's a very light highlight on that bottom eyelid that I carefully filled in with a light value gray. Now that first eyeball needs to be symmetrical to that left eye, and I'm going to repeat those exact same steps, same colors on that left eye. So just a little review here. I start with the eyeball itself, those shadows, then fill in the eyeball with a slightly lighter value of gray, And then I work the darkest value back into that eyeball from the center out, leaving just a little bit of that light gray surrounding the outside of the eyeball. And then I pull out any of the highlights that are really stand out. And on this left eye, there's not too many. And then below that darkest shadow, actually on this eye, it's a little bit lower, I add the little dot for the lightest highlight. And then working around that eye, I apply the eyelid, using a bit more violet with the gray. All right, so hopefully you get the idea on these dark eyes, no iris. I'm going to jump straight ahead to the area around the muzzle, showing you how I joined this fur to that muzzle. So what I do is I exaggerate the yellows that I see in that tan fur of Jack around that muzzle. That also complements the violets in the muzzle and around the eyes, those yellows. So I use raw sienna to darken up the value around those teeth, that teeth area. Then to better join the violet gray muzzle with this, I use a medium value violet. I kind of join those two colors by taking a bit of that yellow ochre and a bit of violet, and that's my joiner color, also known as the medium value. That helps me jump from that really dark violet gray to those yellow browns on the other side. And I cut in with lines because of how fuzzy this muzzle area is. I repeat that exact same thing on the right side, and this is why I always say keep your colors, do your best, your very best to keep those colors damp. And then I combined the violet with the light yellow ochre and white mixture with my lines to cut into the right side of the muzzle now. But we're not done yet. I grab my finest liner brush by Arteza. I have these brushes listed down below. To really join this area, I take that same medium value, that same joiner color, and with very, very fine, thin, short lines, these little peach hairs I add around the muzzle and also around the chin. Then to get rid of the lines that we have created where we applied the violet gray, where it joins with the light tans, I need to get rid of that line. So I go back to my dark gray violets, that same violet with a bit of dark gray to break up that area, and so we can't see that line there anymore behind the peach hairs. And then if I need to touch up any of those medium value peach hairs, I go back to that just in case I went over it with the darker violet. All right, creatives, so I hope you learned a lot from this tutorial. If it blessed you, be sure to like and subscribe. Be sure to comment below with your favorite winter animal and any questions you have. Guys, thank you so much for watching. I'll see you in the next tutorial. Bye.